America didn't fall out of love with EVs because of range on a sunny day. It happened on the first brutal week of winter, when your 300 miles quietly turns into something else, when the heater becomes a tax, and every stop at a charger feels like you're negotiating with the weather. AAA has warned that in real cold, around 20 degrees Fahrenheit with heat on average, EV range can drop by about 41%. And here's the part nobody wants to say out loud. If winter is the biggest trust problem for EVs in the United States, then the next battery breakthrough isn't about chasing 600 miles. It's about surviving the cold without drama. In 2026, a different chemistry steps onto the battlefield: sodium ion, aiming right at winter, right at reliability, right at the one season that can kill adoption in half the country. The question is simple and dangerous. What happens if the winter battery arrives? And it isn't the one America has been betting on. For years, America's EV argument has had a quiet, unspoken footnote. Just don't judge it in winter. People learned workarounds. Preheat the cabin while plugged in. Use seat heaters instead of blasting HVAC. Keep a wider buffer so you're not gambling with the last 10%. And that coping culture didn't come from paranoia. It came from patterns. AAA's testing showed that at 20 degrees Fahrenheit with the heater, on average EV range dropped by 41%. That statistic became a kind of meme and a kind of weapon. It fueled the anti-EV crowd, spooked first-time buyers in cold states, and gave every skeptical pickup owner a simple punchline: see not ready. Meanwhile, the industry built its counterstory on lithium. Tesla leaned into efficiency software, thermal management, heat pumps, route planning that warms the pack on the way to a charger. Detroit leaned into scale battery plants, partnerships, tax credit rules, and the promise that next-gen cells would flatten winter pain. The assumption was almost universal. The battery war would be fought inside the lithium family: LFP-NMC, better electrolytes, better pack architecture. Winter would be managed, not defeated. Then 2025 happened. Catlin announced a sodium-ion battery line, Naxtra, and framed it as the start of a multi-power era, a world where one chemistry doesn't need to do everything. And by February 2026, CATL and Changan went further, unveiling what they describe as the world's first mass-production passenger vehicle, powered by sodium ion, explicitly pushing a dual chemistry future, where sodium ion and lithium ion complement each other. Whether you love or hate that announcement, the strategic message is clear. The industry isn't only optimizing lithium anymore. Someone is trying to change the game board. To understand why winter breaks EV trust, you have to stop thinking like a brochure and start thinking like physics. Cold doesn't simply reduce range. Cold slows. The chemistry raises internal resistance and forces the car to spend energy just to keep the battery and cabin in a usable temperature window. That's why two EVs can both claim similar range on paper and still feel like they live in different universes the moment you hit freezing weather. Real-world winter data shows how wide that gap can be. Some models keep close to their normal range while others fall off a cliff. Lithium-ion systems fight cold with thermal management, preconditioning heat pumps, and software that limits power to protect the cells. This works, but it's still a workaround, because the deeper problem is that the battery is operating in a less friendly chemical environment. In the sodium-ion world, researchers have argued that sodium ions can show better low-temperature diffusion behavior than lithium ions under certain conditions, which could translate into more stable charge/discharge when the temperature drops. That doesn't mean sodium ion magically eliminates winter loss. It means the shape of the winter penalty might be different, and that alone is a huge strategic shift for a market like the US, where winter is the reputational battlefield. Here's the part that hurts adoption. People can tolerate some range loss, but they cannot tolerate uncertainty at a charger. When a cold pack refuses high power, a quick stop becomes a negotiation. Wait longer, drive slower, reroute, or accept a bigger buffer. That's why winter isn't just a range story, it's a time story. And this is where sodium ion is being marketed like a weapon. CATL's own communications around its Naxtra sodium ion platform emphasize mass production readiness and real passenger car deployment, with pack and system design aimed at practical usability rather than lab demos. Let's say sodium ion wins cold reliability. You still pay for it somewhere. Sodium ion generally trails LFP/NMC on energy density, which matters for long-range vehicles and heavy platforms. But a large chunk of America's EV growth is still fought in the good enough zone. Commuters, second cars, city drivers, and buyers who want predictable winter behavior more than they want a heroic EPA number. CATL's February 2026 announcement with Chang'an framed this as the start of a dual chemistry era, where sodium ion and lithium ion can be deployed by use case. CATL's own figures for Naxtra talk about mass production energy density up to 175 watt-hours per kilogram and a pure electric range exceeding 400 kilometers for a passenger vehicle configuration. If you live in California, winter is a footnote. If you live in Michigan, Minnesota, upstate New York, or the Rockies, winter is the whole review. That's why sodium ion's cold advantage messaging is radioactive. In the US, it targets the exact states where EV skepticism is loudest and where Detroit needs conversions the most. Reports around the first mass production sodium ion passenger car highlight claims of extreme cold capability that, if verified at scale, would be the kind of headline that changes showroom conversations overnight. And now we arrive at the uncomfortable pivot. If winter reliability is the trust bottleneck, then the battery war is no longer just who has more range. It becomes who makes winter boring. Because boring is what sells. And that sets up the next question. If a winter battery exists, where does it hit America first, and which US benchmark gets embarrassed on the coldest day of the year? In America, you don't win the EV argument by being the best electric car. You win by surviving the pickup comparison. Because the pickup isn't just a vehicle here. It's a lifestyle contract, long distances, unpredictable weather, heavy loads, and the expectation that the truck will do what you ask without negotiating back. That's why the real benchmark fight isn't a spec sheet duel. It's a trust duel. So let's set the stage the way US buyers actually think. On one side, you have the symbols of real America Ford F-150, Silverado Ram vehicles built around worst-case use. On the other side, you have the mainstream EV reference point Tesla Model Y, the car that taught millions of Americans what an EV feels like on a normal day. The problem is that winter is not a normal day, and AAA's findings about cold weather range loss show why the winter conversation becomes emotional fast. If your range drops sharply when temperatures fall and the heater is on, the buyer doesn't care. Whether it's physics, HVAC, or battery chemistry, they care that the promise changed. Now imagine, sodium ion doesn't magically give you more miles, but it gives you something more valuable in the Midwest: predictability. If the winter penalty curve is flatter, if the car behaves more consistently when cold, then the conversation at the dealership changes overnight. Suddenly, the question isn't, how far can it go on paper? It's how boring is it in January? Because boring means fewer surprises, fewer complaints, fewer returns, fewer viral horror stories. This is why the dual chemistry strategy matters in a US context. CATL has been openly framing sodium ion as part of a multi-power era chemistry deployed by mission. That could mean lithium ion stays the hero for long-range and high-density needs, while sodium ion becomes the winter-stable option for certain trims, fleets, or regions. And if that segmentation works, Detroit faces a nightmare and an opportunity at the same time. A nightmare because one universal battery strategy becomes harder. An opportunity because you can build a product lineup that matches America's climate map instead of fighting it. Here's the uncomfortable benchmark implication. If a mainstream EV priced and marketed for normal families can be made reliably boring in cold states, the pickup skepticism loses its easiest punchline. The anti-EV argument has lived on a simple image. Winter proves EVs aren't ready. If sodium-ion even partially disarms that image, the debate shifts from ideology to logistics, and that's where adoption accelerates. And that sets up the next battlefield, the one no consumer sees supply chains, policy, tariffs, and industrial power. Because even if the winter battery is real, America still has to decide whether it wants to buy it, build it, or block it. Here's where the story stops being about batteries and starts being about power. Because the United States isn't just trying to sell EVs, it's trying to control the industrial spine behind EVs, the mines, the refining, the cathodes, the cells, the pack plants, the jobs, the tax credits, the unions, the politics. In that world, a new chemistry is never just a new chemistry. It's a new leverage point. Sodium-ion is seductive for one reason that's bigger than cold weather. It whispers the promise of a different supply chain logic. Sodium is far more abundant than lithium, and the narrative writes itself: less dependence, less volatility, more room to scale, at the bottom of the market. But the twist is brutal. Abundance doesn't equal control. Even if sodium is everywhere, the early industrial execution, manufacturing know-how, patents, production lines, the first wave of mass production deployments can still be concentrated elsewhere, which means America faces a strategic fork. Do you import a winter battery to win adoption now, or do you slow it down to protect domestic build-out? This is why CATL's messaging about a multi-power era matters. They're not claiming sodium-ion will replace lithium-ion overnight. They're arguing the opposite. The future is mixed different chemistries deployed by mission, cost, target, and environment. In a purely technical sense, that sounds rational. In a geopolitical sense, it's explosive. Because once the market accepts two chemistries, the market also accepts two supply chains. And two supply chains means two sets of dependencies, two lobbying forces, two policy battlegrounds. Now add tariffs and industrial policy, and the plot thickens. The US has been using incentives and local content rules to shape where battery value is created. If sodium-ion begins arriving through non-US channels, especially as a winter fix, consumers actually want policy stops being an abstract debate and becomes a consumer pain question. Are you willing to pay more or wait longer, just so the chemistry is made inside the borders? That's not a science argument. That's a political argument with a monthly payment attached. And then there's labor. A chemistry shift is a production shift. New pack designs, new cell formats, new supplier ecosystems. That can mean new jobs or the relocation of existing jobs. It can trigger union pressure, state-level bidding wars for plants, and boardroom panic inside automakers that already feel stretched by EV investment. So when people say, will sodium-ion help EVs in winter? They're asking the small question. The big question is, if sodium-ion becomes the practical chemistry for the cold, states does America embrace it and risk new dependencies? Or does America resist it and risk slowing adoption exactly where it's hardest to win? So here's the verdict, cold and simple. The EV war in America will not be decided by the biggest range number on a billboard. It will be decided by the week that breaks people the first week of real winter. The winner won't be the company with the loudest promise. It will be the one that makes January boring, predictable, repeatable, and free of surprises at the charger. Sodium-ion may never be the chemistry that powers the longest road trip or the heaviest tow. It doesn't need to be. If it becomes the chemistry that makes cold states stop doubting EVs, if it flattens the winter penalty, stabilizes charging behavior, and lowers the emotional cost of ownership, then it changes the market faster than another 50 miles ever could. And if KTL's multi-power era really arrives, then America isn't just choosing a battery. America is choosing a strategy, one chemistry, versus a portfolio, one supply chain, versus two, one political story, versus a messy reality. Because in technology, wars, the victor is rarely the best product on paper. It's the product that changes behavior. And the moment winter stops being the punchline, that's when adoption stops being an argument and becomes a habit.